Part 2. I want to see God for myself. Even before I thought about my psychic ability, I used to think a lot about the existence of God. Although I was raised Catholic and attended 9 years of Catholic school, I found the Catholic view of God to be too limited and unrealistic. We had to believe in a deity on blind faith, and that confused me all the more. I was plagued with questions like, how do we know God really exists? Has anyone ever James Van Praagh 8 seen God? How does God make things from nothing? Who wrote the stories in the Bible, and are they true? As much as I wanted to believe in the God molded by the rituals and laws of the church, I did not feel a personal experience of God inside me. Was it my duty simply to live out this daily ceremony? I felt I was missing a piece of the puzzle. Had the nuns kept something from me? Did I miss something at Mass that everyone else had picked up on? Was I the only one to question their beliefs? The request seemed simple enough in my young mind. If there is a God, please show me proof. My prayer was answered when I was 8 years old. I was lying in bed early one morning when I felt a strong gust of cold wind blow across my face. I pulled the blankets closer to me and looked over to my bedroom window. It was tightly shut. As I tried to figure out how that gust of wind got in my room, I looked up and saw a large hand, palm down, coming from the ceiling. The hand glowed with a pulsating white light. I was mesmerized, but somehow unafraid. I didn't understand what was happening, but perhaps because I was a child, I had no fear. I was willing to accept the image I was seeing as real. I was suddenly filled with an overwhelming sense of peace, love, and joy. Although there was no booming voice of God, as often described in the Bible, to answer my questions or talking to heaven 9 reveal my destiny, I knew that this vision was God. I also knew that I would do whatever was necessary to experience that joyful feeling again. I began to understand that there was much more to life than what I had been taught and what I could see through my physical eyes. The illuminated hand of God was my first clairvoyant experience, and though the impact was impressive, I never mentioned it to anyone. I felt it was my secret and that no one would believe me anyway. Later, I would learn much more about clairvoyance, when the mind is impressed with various images, shapes, scenes, spirits, faces, and remote locations not visible to the physical eye. For example, before falling asleep at night, a number of different forms, faces, and scenarios are seen or played out in our mind's eye. Clairvoyance is similar to seeing these pictures in our mind. I will explain clairvoyance further in Chapter 2. A séance. Early one Saturday evening, after the startling demonstration of the hand, I was convinced of the existence of God. After all, only God could manifest out of thin air. However, a whole new set of questions popped into mind. I became fascinated with the concept of death and what happens after we die. I found myself asking James Van Praagh 10 what if questions about heaven and life after death. Is there a place where we go after we die? Is there really a heaven or hell, or a place in between? Is life infinite? All I knew is what I had been taught in Catholic school, and that was too one-sided. What do other people believe about God and life after death? I wanted to understand. I wanted to know more. I wanted to investigate further. Little did I know that a supernatural adventure would come soon. Scott and I were best friends. We played ball, and did all the other routine kid stuff together. We also experimented with the usual paranormal games that seemed to be part of growing up for most kids. We would jokingly ask questions of the magic 8-ball, but our grins would soon fade when answers such as reply hazy. Ask again later turned up. How could it really know? We contacted spirits on a Ouija board, though each of us secretly believed it was the other one pushing the planchette. So it seemed only natural that one Saturday morning we decided to have a séance at 7 o'clock that evening. 7 was about as close to the witching hour as any 12-year-olds were going to get. I remember that day vividly. It seemed to drag on forever. Visions of every Vincent Price movie I had ever seen flashed through my mind. Somehow, I knew this night was going to be special, something big was going to occur. By 6:45 talking to Heaven 11, I was too anxious to wait any longer. 2 hours earlier I found a white candle and stuffed it in my pocket. I thought we would need it to conduct the proper séance. I raced to Scott's house in record time. With a quick hello to his parents, I hurried off with Scott to the den. I handed Scott the candle. He lit it and solemnly placed it in the center of an ashtray on a table positioned between us. We closed the windows, turned off the lights, sat facing each other, and waited. We both felt a little nervous even though we told ourselves it was all just a gag. The atmosphere was appropriately spooky. The candle created strange shadows around the room, outlining our faces with an eerie glow. The best part of this game was to see who got scared and ran first. We sat in silence for 30 minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What's next?" I asked impatiently. Scott shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe we should ask to speak to someone." It was the 1-year anniversary of the death of Janis Joplin, so Scott suggested we call her. We chanted our call to Janis for about 10 minutes. We waited. Nothing happened. We called Janis again. The candle flame remained still. There were no mysterious knocks on the table. No cold wind passed through the room. We waited some more. Our eyes and James Van Praagh 12 Stanley darted around the room, looking for any movement, any sign that Janis had arrived. But, alas, we were two 12-year-olds getting bored. I decided to try one last request. "Janis, if you're in the room, give us a sign with the candle," I commanded in my deepest, most melodramatic voice. The candle flickered slightly. Suddenly, the flame leaned to the left and held there for a second. Then, it moved to the right and stayed there. Scott and I sat frozen in place. The flame began to move frantically from left to right and back again. Neither of us could breathe. Whatever moved the candle flame, it certainly was not us. We were too petrified to try anything. Suddenly the candle went out, and the room was plunged into total darkness. In a fit of bravery, we both went screaming from the room to the safety of Scott's parents. Did we contact Janis Joplin? Who knows? I do believe we opened a door to something or someone apart from the physical world. However, I do find it ironic that what started out as a gag between two kids was a somewhat entertaining induction into what has become my career. Other psychic phenomena. As I recall other events in my childhood, I had many peculiar and otherworldly experiences. I talking to Heaven 13 guess you could say that the seance experience was the most dramatic in a macabre sort of way. It was only one of several such experiences that I now know were definite precursors to a life intertwined with spiritualism, suspense, and mystery. The credo of my life has always been, the unknown is something not yet found. It was a part of my nature to seek out the unexplainable and find answers. Therefore, my curiosity would often take me to places where angels fear to tread. As a child, I often found a variety of games, subjects, and distractions to assist in my validation of and fascination with the occult world. A couple of my most cherished attractions were haunted houses and graveyards. Just the idea that a house supposedly contained unseen living forms roaming the hallways totally intrigued me. The natural detective in me would often take over, and I could not rest until I solved the mystery that was before me. The Bell House was just such a mystery. A menacing structure, it was masked in chipped, antique grey paint, its worn-out shutters barely clinging to their hinges. Some were half-closed over yellow-tinted windows. Bell House lived in a century that was far forgotten, when horse and buggy ruled the streets and livestock grazed lazily on the land. The house, or manor, as it was known, was an ominous sight as it stood hidden beneath overgrown trees. James Van Praagh 14 far from the street's pavement. To my childish eyes, it appeared as though its spires stretched straight up into the stratosphere of heaven. Bell House had been abandoned for over 50 years but had remained a daunting landmark on my way to and from school. I remember how we would run by it as fast as possible because of the stories that had evolved about it. There was the one about an old white-haired lady whose unrelenting wails were heard throughout the house. As the story went, this lady had a son who was a sea merchant. After many idle months of not working, she insisted he go on an expedition. The son begrudgingly went and was never seen again. It seemed there was a sudden change in the weather, and the ship on which the son sailed was destroyed in a huge storm. No one survived. His mother never accepted this explanation and thought her son ran away. From then on, she would often be seen roaming the rooms of the house looking for her boy and howling in sorrow throughout the night. Occasionally, she would leave a candle burning, hoping her son would see it and be guided home. But that was not the worst part. All of us kids knew that if we just happened to look at the house and laid our eyes on the lady's face, she would come to our bedroom at night talking to Heaven 15 while we were sleeping and take us back to her house to live with her forever. My friends and I never forgot that story of Bell House, and even if it wasn't true, it certainly added a bit of excitement to our otherwise dreary walk to and from school. As I got a little older, probably around the age of 10 or 11, I pretty much discarded the harmless yarn about the old lady and her son, but I still found myself extremely fascinated with the house. I would stop in front of it and look up at the second-floor window, hoping to catch a glimmer of a burning candle or hear the soft whispers of a mumbled cry. There was definitely something in that house. I knew it. It seemed to be calling out to me, and I had to answer its call. One day I did. My would-be mystical accomplice Scott and a couple of other brave souls from the neighborhood decided to follow my lead. Somehow, we had to find a way into the house. We decided the best way to gain access was through the back, which was practically buried under the trees. There was no fence to keep us out, so the job was easier than we first thought. After making it through the trees, our eyes fixed themselves on a decrepit, worn-out wooden house. The fortress that was once the object of so many frightful and horrendous tales appeared to be nothing more than a pile of frayed wood and outdated cement. James Van Praagh 16 as luck would have it, there was a window alongside the back door. As one of the guys kept watch, the rest of us pulled a board off the window. A stream of sunshine touched a century of darkness. We carefully crawled into the house, which from the looks of it had barely made it through time. I instantly felt chills as I stood in the room. But my preconceived sense of dread and fright turned out to be feelings of joy and laughter. As I looked around, I saw what resembled a huge living room, much longer than wide. The walls were stained in yesterday's rain, and molted pink wallpaper hung torn and tattered. There were huge, gaping holes in parts of the walls that covered over wooden slats. As I walked through the room, I had a strange feeling that this was a place where dinner dances were held. I could almost see the people waltzing by. In one corner of the large room, I imagined a small band playing for the guests until the wee hours of the morning. I continued to walk straight through to an attached room on the far side. More than likely, it was a dining room large enough to accommodate a good-sized crowd. I could see a banquet table full of the finest foods. Upon the table were candlelight chandeliers illuminating the evening's fare. Suddenly, I was snapped out of my reverie by the sound of my friend Kevin's scream. Talking to Heaven 17, "Holy cow, look at this stuff," he hollered. When I joined Kevin and the rest of the guys in the other room, I saw what made him so excited. Strewn across the floor were various books and photographs in all shapes and sizes. Many of the books were on merchandising, trade, and seamanship. Several others were accounting ledgers containing penciled-in figures. As we simultaneously noticed the books on shipping and boating, all of our faces turned white. Together we turned toward the door, searching for our nearest means of escape. All at once we vividly remembered the early childhood tales about the merchant son and his mother. Was it true after all? We shuddered to think what might happen to us. What if the place was haunted and ghosts were lurking in the hallways? I don't know if it was a guy thing, but no one was about to show how scared he was, even though I knew we were all shaking in our shoes. We decided to stay close together and further investigate our surroundings. I picked up a couple of pictures from the floor and looked at them. They were pictures of children. One was a baby, and the other was of two boys neatly dressed. Their resemblance clearly marked them as brothers. As I held the picture, I felt a sense that someone was standing behind me. You know that feeling, when you think someone James Van Praagh 18 is walking behind you. It felt exactly like that. Frightened, I immediately dropped the picture. It was the white-haired lady coming to capture me. Slowly, I turned my head to look behind me and saw nothing. It must be my imagination. Then the oddest thing happened. I suddenly had a thought to walk to the corner of the room and pick up the photograph closest to the wall. So, I walked over, bent down, and picked up the picture. Staring back at me in the framed photograph was a glamorous-looking lady wearing a long, dark dress and holding a beautiful bouquet. She had an incredible, sweet face with deep-set eyes that seemed to look right through me. Her hair was tied in a bun held taut with a ribbon. As I held the picture close to me, I got a feeling that this was the mother of the children in the two photos. I can't describe how I knew exactly, but I just did. I looked down and saw a picture of a mustached man, his arms folded, and his eyes staring straight ahead. I picked that one up as well. As I held on to his picture, I knew that he was the lady's husband. I had this feeling that they were a family who entertained frequently. They would have been a very wealthy and influential family in the area. As I looked at other family pictures, I gathered that they had some kind of tie to politics. I could not explain my feelings to my friends, and they all talking to Heaven 19 thought I was crazy or had a pretty vivid imagination. But I knew there was a force of some kind pushing me toward that corner of the room. What was it? Who was it? Why did I know this family in particular enjoyed entertaining, or that they meddled in politics? Was I being told by the ghosts who still walk the halls? Was the childhood tale of a white-haired lady and her merchant son true? I found out the answers to all my inquiries 3 years later. I'll never forget it. I was at home, and the mail had just arrived. There was a booklet from the Bayside Historical Society entitled Bayside, Yesterday and Today. It described how the town was first inhabited by various Indian tribes, then Dutch, and ultimately English merchants. It wasn't until I got to the part about the Bell House that my interest was aroused. Abraham Bell, a wealthy shipping merchant, had purchased 300 acres of land on which he built a manor for his family in 1849. His family was rather large and included 2 sons very close in age. It was one of the first settlements in Bayside. I read further. The Bells were part of the elite, or high society, and they often enjoyed entertaining civic officials from New York City and various politicians from Washington, D.C. Fascinated, I continued reading. As I turned the next page, my eyes grew wide. Staring back from the page were James Van Praagh 20 photos of Mr. and Mrs. Bell, the exact same photos I had held in my hand 3 years earlier. They were confirmation of my feelings on that eventful visit. My other mystifying experiences all occurred around the same age, when I was 10 or 11. During lunch break, a bunch of us would get bored and want to do something different instead of playing kickball or jump rope with the girls. Some of the cooler guys would go into town and see how many things they could steal from the local 5 and dime without getting caught. When they returned to school in the afternoon, they would proudly display their haul, usually pens, rulers, and markers. Great extracurricular activity for Catholic school students. Anyway, since I was neither cool nor thief, I did what I thought was cool. A bunch of us would go to the Lawrence Cemetery. This family-owned cemetery was established in the early 1800s. It has since become an historical landmark. On one particular lunch jaunt to the cemetery, I had a very interesting and intriguing experience. 2 of my schoolmates and I were sitting under a tree finishing our lunch. We were thoroughly enjoying the sunny, warm spring day in the serenity of the cemetery and contemplated the idea of cutting school the rest of the day. As we debated back and talking to Heaven 21/4, we suddenly heard 2 kids laughing not too far from us. We all looked toward the giggles, but we didn't see anything. We rationalized that it was probably some kids in a backyard nearby, and their voices had traveled. Well, after we were comfortable with that explanation, the laughter started again. We all felt very weird and a little scared. We decided to investigate the source of the laughter. As we walked toward the area, once again we heard children laughing. We still could not see anything, and reluctantly we continued to walk. As we got closer, my buddy Peter yelled out, "Look!" We saw 2 little kids, a boy and a girl, who resembled each other. They looked about 5 and 6 years old. As we approached them, they ran off, and we could not find them anywhere. This is the weird part. We had visited the cemetery many times and had hardly seen anyone there, and never any young kids. We figured we better get back to school. As we turned to leave, my friend Tim screamed, "Look at this." He was staring at something. It was a tombstone with the names of two children, a sister and a brother, who died at ages 4 and 5. Was it an apparition? I honestly can't say, but my friends never wanted to talk about it again. These experiences might have foretold my future if I was able to understand them at the time. James Van Praagh 22, but as an otherwise normal kid, I was more interested in
Soulmate. This is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.